Hello environmental science students. Today I'm going to go over some common FRQ facts to help you improve your writing, as well as review some content that will help you prepare for the AP exam or just review content for the year. In particular, today we're going to talk about how to answer questions about rates or changes. We've seen this a couple of different times, most recently in one of the practice FRQs that I gave you about soil and agriculture. We also saw it earlier in this year with a question about white nose syndrome in bats. These types of FRQs tend to be described questions that is asking about something that is changing or a cause and effect. Let's go ahead and dive into the first FRQ about soil formation. So the first one asks about how do climate factors affect the rate of soil formation. In this, in particular, we are noticing in the prompt that it says the rate of soil formation, so how is one factor related to another? This is testing your knowledge about climate factors, such as an abiotic environmental condition. It is not directly related to anything about climate change, which took me by surprise because when I first started grading this, I was under the wrong assumption that this was asking about climate change, and when I reread the prompt, I realized it was just talking about climate factors. So climate factors could be temperature can be high or low, precipitation could be high or low, and winds can be quite variable. It's also testing your knowledge about factors that influence soil formation, that is biological decomposition, physical chemical weathering, and erosion. Your answer has to have a cause and effect. A high level of something will lead to an increase or decrease in something else. And then because it's a described question, you have to have the supportive reasoning. So you should always follow that with because. Let's look at what earns the point. Here we are seeing a prompt that bacteria are an important soil formation. Bacteria are an important part of soil formation because they decompose organic matter, which is a component of soil. Higher temperatures would lead to an increase in the reproduction and activity level of bacteria, which would increase the rate of soil production. Here we see we have higher temperatures would lead to increased reproduction and activity level of bacteria. That is addressing the cause and effect. What's our supportive reasoning? We said it straight up front. Bacteria are an important part of soil formation because they decompose organic matter, which is a component of soil. We have the cause and effect. We have information about an increase in temperature leading to an increase in reproduction of bacteria and our supportive reasoning. Let's look at another example. Precipitation can vary from location to location or year to year. Where there's high precipitation, it can lead to an increase in the physical weathering of rocks because this would be broken up into smaller pieces at a faster rate. Weathering of rocks provides the minerals in soil. We have a rate, high precipitation, increase in physical weathering, and our supportive reasoning talks about what physical weathering is and how it would increase, so that breaking up into the smaller pieces at a faster rate, and we know that minerals are a component of soil. Next example we see this is on that same FRQ. It now asks for describing 2 ways that climate change can degrade soil. Here notice the prompt is saying that the climate is changing. So it's testing your knowledge about climate change. What do you know about something that is changing in regards to climate change? So we know temperatures are increasing, sea levels are rising, precipitation might be increasing or decreasing depending on the location. This is also testing your knowledge about factors that affect soil quality. Erosion, soil formation, desertification, salinization are some of the most common ways that you could approach this answer, but not all of the ways. Your answer must have 2 directions. It already says that climate is changing, so you have to tell me something that is changing specifically about climate change, and then your other has to have a direction about soil degradation. So an increase or decrease in something related to climate change will lead to an increase or decreasing in something about soil being degraded, and because this is a describe, you have to have the supportive reasoning. Let's look at what earns the point. Here's an example. Climate change can lead to an increase in precipitation in some areas. With this increase in precipitation, there's an increase in erosion of topsoil. Topsoil is a critical component of soil because it contains all of the nutrients such as nitrogen required by plants to grow. Let's break that down. We've got an increase in precipitation. Here we're relating that back to climate change. And then we've got an increase in soil erosion. Directionality in both of those. Our supportive reasoning is that topsoil is a critical component of soil quality, and we know that topsoil is the source of the nitrogen, a nutrient which is required by plants. Finally, let's look at one example that doesn't relate to our current content. This goes back in the year, back to ecosystems and populations. This was also from 2016 FRQ, and I'll read it. Bats are found in ecosystems around the world. Describe 2 ways in which other organisms in an ecosystem would be affected by a decline in a bat population. Notice the prompt is saying that bats are declining, and it's asking you about another aspect of the ecosystem. In this question, ecosystem represents something else in the natural world. In this case, it has to be something else that is also living or a biotic component, because that would be responsive. A non-living or abiotic component of the ecosystem wouldn't respond. It's not a density-dependent factor, it's a density-independent factor. The prompt is also asking about a population-level response. It's appropriate but not necessary to address another population. For example, we also know that if there's a decrease in the number of bats, we wouldn't have bats defecating as much, so there wouldn't be as much bat guano, and that could impact the amount of nutrient cycling in ecosystem. That's pretty much the only example where you'd be able to connect it to something that was non-living. However, you should really shy away from that and go with another population level response. So your answer should show directionality as well. Be clear on the direction and use appropriate scientific terminology. So this prompt already says there's a decline in the bat population. We would need an increase or a decrease someplace else, a rise or a decline, or a growth or reduction in the number of another population. Don't use non-scientific words, because this is all about what you say, not about what you mean. Let's look at an example. Oh, also don't forget to include your supportive reasoning or an example, because this is a describe level question. So what earns the point and what doesn't? Let's look at this prompt. A decline in the bat population could cause an increase in the mosquito population because mosquitoes are prey items for many bat species. When a predator declines in abundance and no other predator increases their consumption of a prey item, the prey population is released from density-dependent control and their population increases. Let's take this apart. We have our decline in the bat population, therefore an increase in the mosquito population or their prey species, and our supportive reasoning tells the reader that we know exactly what happens and why. Let's look at what doesn't earn the point. So here, a decline in the bat population would cause mosquitoes to flourish because bats no longer eat them. Why isn't this a correct answer? We have that decline in the bat population. We say that mosquitoes are flourishing, and we've got supportive reasoning. But we don't ever say that the mosquito population is flourishing. We say that just mosquitoes are flourishing. And as you can see in this picture, this individual mosquito is flourishing because it is, in a funny way, able to purchase more clothes, or it's got a more dapper appearance, but the whole population isn't flourishing. So here's clearly where the student meant to say that the mosquito population is increasing, but they chose to use a non-scientific word. All right, let's summarize. Anytime that there's a rate, your answer must have a cause and effect. So think of a high or low level will lead to an increase or decrease. Always have your supportive reasoning. If the question asks about changes, your answer must have 2 directions. Usually you can restate something that was in the prompt. So an increase or decrease would lead to an increase or decrease in something else, again with your supportive reasoning. If your question has directionality, it states that something is increasing or decreasing, your answer should show directionality as well. Always be clear on the direction and use appropriate scientific terminology. As a teacher or as a grader, we can only grade what you write and not what you meant to say. I hope that helps.